Representative Green, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be with you.
So President Biden's pick for Commerce Secretary is Rhode Island Governor Gina Marie Raimondo, and you joined about 20 other House Republicans calling on the Senate to hold off confirming her until the Biden administration can give a clear answer if they plan to keep Huawei, China's telecom company, on the Commerce Department's entity list. And 2 days later, on February 4th, Senator Ted Cruz did exactly that. He put a hold on Raimondo's confirmation hearing. Can you explain to us why it is that Huawei is at the center of controversy over this nomination?
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me on the show. I think there are really two reasons. One, and perhaps the most important, is the security of America's information systems and our data. Huawei it's not necessarily a state-owned enterprise, but the CCP passed a law, their national intelligence law, in 2017 that requires every single company in China to share, their data and their information, anything that relates to intelligence, which is defined by the CCP, with the government, with the Communist Party. So that puts all of our data at risk. We do know in the past that Huawei networks that have been set up in, for example, the South African Union, and there were some network stuff put in, Vodafone did, through in Italy, that resulted in devices being planted to gather information. So there's an issue of trust. There's an issue of their requirement to share that information. And then Huawei's and China's theft of intellectual property has given Huawei an incredible unfair advantage. You look at what happened to Motorola. We just think it's wrong to support a company that and a country that allows that kind of stuff to happen.
And so also earlier this week, Huawei launched a lawsuit in the U.S. Because the Federal Communications Commission in December had ruled that Huawei is a national security threat and blocked American telecom operators from dealing with Huawei equipment. So they're launching a lawsuit to try to get this reversed. How do you think that's going to play out, given signaling you've seen from the Biden administration so far?
Well, I think that really depends on the judge and their sensitivity to this sort of national security level stuff. I hope that the judge will dig into it, understand the threat that's there, and really understand what 5G is. I mean, it will allow information, the synchronization of information and data over the networks in an exponential fashion that's going to make, you think about BIDO and the GPS system that the Chinese have set up, all of that information will go straight into those satellites. I mean, it's going to be an incredible penetration into our data systems, and it's just, considering the risk with China and the CCP, one we should not take.
So how do you think this is going to play out with the nomination of Raimondo? Because right now it's being blocked by Senator Cruz, and you're waiting some sort of clarification. So what if the clarification comes that we will consider taking Huawei off the entity list? And maybe you can explain about the entity list for a moment, too.
Sure. So I hope that Senator Cruz will hold on until they give not assurances that they're going to consider it, but assurances that they won't allow Huawei to be a part of those networks in the United States. That's really what we want to hear, and that's what the list does. The list has companies that can't deal with basically can't do business in the United States and with other companies inside the United States, protecting our national security.
And so President Biden also signed an executive order which sort of plays into this level of security threat, repealing the ban on Chinese equipment being used in the American electrical grid. Repealed it while, going to be considering, other measures. But right now, does that leave America vulnerable?
Absolutely. As many people know, you can actually run a network off your electrical system in your home. You can wire a network through the power grid in your house. So it's obviously a big concern for us that they're going to be putting equipment into, electronic equipment into our power grids and in our monitoring stations for power. So that's a big concern. And I don't understand why the Biden administration would prefer Chinese companies over American companies. That makes no sense to me. There are fantastic American companies, Schneider Electric being one of those, many, many others that should be getting that business. And these are our networks built by our co-ops and in some cases government service providers, utility companies. There is no reason to give preferential treatment or even to allow competition from China when we know, I mean, essentially they are our big competitor.
So why do you think the Biden administration took this move?
I don't want to speculate. I'll leave that to others for the time being. I just implore the administration to deeply consider reversing that opinion.
You pointed out in this statement signed by about 20 Republican House members, and you pointed out that there are actually a lot of Democrats who have also expressed concerns about the security threat posed by Huawei. Are you aware, is there cross-aisle conversations going on about Huawei going on right now?
Absolutely. We can have conversations. This is more of a whispers in the hallway, if you will. But there are a lot of Democrats who realize that the challenge that we face with China. And I just sat through Secretary Austin, but when I sat in the committee hearing with him, he was then, General Retired Austin, and he expressed that they are our pacing threat. Those were his words. China is our pacing threat. So very clearly, there are members of the Biden administration who get this strategic competition with China. So hopefully, those people are whispering in the president's ear, and he's listening.
Well, there are, words being spoken even by, in the confirmation hearing by Governor Raimondo. She expressed that China, is a threat, that we need to take it seriously, and yet unwilling to come out and explicitly say, yes, we will keep Huawei on the list. So how much confidence do you have in the understanding about the real threat China poses?
Well, I don't understand sometimes what the Biden administration does. I'll give you an example. They talk about being for the workers and for the unions, and they cut the Keystone Pipeline that destroys tens of thousands of jobs. I mean, they'll say one thing and do another. So I hope in this case, for the sake of our national security, that they're not speaking out of both sides of their mouths. But obviously it's something that I would be concerned about. I mean, I want to hear definitively that Huawei isn't going to be used in America.
And if you don't hear that?
Well, we'll keep pushing back and, draft legislation. We'll, wage a grassroots campaign. Our goal is to retake control of the House in 2 years so we can make sure that the damage they want to do doesn't get done.
And are there other key picks from the Biden administration that you have concern about, particularly in terms of the U.S.-China relationship?
So far, I feel like you look at the defense secretary. I actually served with Secretary Austin. He was in the 3rd Brigade of the 82nd Airborne Division with me. I was in the 1st Battalion of that brigade. He commanded the 2nd Battalion of that brigade while I was a rifle company commander. His reputation, very good. The comments that he made in our committee hearing that day stressed the things that we wanted to hear. So far, I've been okay with those picks. Obviously, here with Commerce, it's concerning because those networks and the power grid, all that stuff is a Commerce Department issue. I'm just hopeful they'll be definitive.
I believe Secretary of State Tony Blinken also wouldn't commit to maintaining the entities list. Is that a concern?
Yeah, of course it is. The Secretary of State he's our diplomat. He's the senior diplomat for the United States government. We need that individual fully understanding what's going on and committed to protecting the security of our data. So that is concerning.
So as a military man yourself, what do you think are the biggest concerns over the next, say, 2 years that the U.S. should address?
Well, very clearly, I think the China issue is number one. We also have to think about China in terms of its Belt and Road Initiative internationally, attempting to drive a wedge between us and our friends. There are NATO countries, EU countries that have signed on to the Belt and Road. That's a concern. In Latin America, we've seen the commodity extraction from particularly South America create issues with their currency, and then the downstream effects on manufacturing and other types of economic impact in those countries. Obviously, also with China, the manufacturing issue for certain safety things like PPE and drug precursors. We have to fix that. Those are just a handful. We also have a need for things like infrastructure. We've got to fix some infrastructure issues in the country. So there's a very long list. We're going to have to overcome, the downstream effects to some of the, I think, COVID. Now we're going to do another 1.9 trillion. That's just more debt. So we have to take that on and figure that out. And of course, finishing up the vaccine distribution and getting the economy back open.
And just before we wrap up, since you brought up COVID, the WHO finished its tour assessment in Wuhan in China. They came back. I think you weren't very happy with the results of that. And Biden administration is also looking to rejoin the WHO. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the WHO is very clearly tainted by China. Tedros was actually selected through a process where China influenced him becoming the leadership at the WHO. So there's a conflict of interest as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to see new leadership at the WHO. I will say you can't fix a ship, a sinking ship, if you bail off the ship. So we do need to be involved, engaged, and get the World Health Organization back to being an honest broker when it comes to world health.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.